Hey, what's up guys? Node Investor here, bringing a quick update on the markets here. Not a lot of change all around as we look at the charts here. This is the daily chart, just continuing to drift lower here on the 1 day chart of BTC on Coinbase. A couple of levels to keep noting. I mentioned in a quick update I did yesterday that wick low that we saw here, 34.60 essentially, was a must hold, a place that the bulls defended. A lot of volume came in at that low. It was a quick reversal. Then we saw a retest of that low here today. We're on a new daily candle here. It's flipped over now, but essentially we saw that retest on the lows today, ending right around that $3,500 mark. So just a couple of levels to be watching here near term. A lot of people continue to think that we're going to see this 3,000 price point hit. If you zoom out and look at the big picture, where we are now is essentially a minor support zone here around that 3,600 level. Below that, not a lot of support, going down to around 3,300 and then 3,000. So it's still a pretty wide range, but the volume is starting to spike here at the lows. You can see the last couple of days, you're certainly starting to see that volume pick up here as prices have been very volatile. Today was just choppy, volatile action across the board. Nothing major from the altcoin perspective. They're pretty much just following BTC. There have been a few pumps. We saw Request Network. You continue to see QKC and Factum. Factum starting to roll over a little bit now, but besides a handful of names across the board, just kind of following the same tone as BTC. Let's zoom in a little bit and look at the closer time frames. Looking at the 4-hour chart here, you can see the 10 EMA and the 22 EMA are the lines that you see on the chart here, and they just continue to act as resistance on any bounces. We saw that bounce here yesterday, which peaked out almost exactly that 22 EMA, saw a retest of that, and it just really started to roll over here today. The same level continues to be that support, now resistance, that I'm watching. We had this little bit of a base starting to form here. It was really just a descending pattern which finally broke lower, and any bounces into that have continued to be rejected. That's really the near-term resistance to be watching, which is around that 4,100 up to about 4,200. Getting above 4,200 would really be positive for the bulls, as this would start to form a little bit of a double bottom type of pattern here in the near term, but there is no confirmation of that whatsoever yet. In fact, the momentum is still very much in favor of the bears, and so I'd be watching this near-term support much more closely, and that's right around that $3,600 level. So right now the momentum is leaning lower. The positive is there is some volume starting to come in here on these dips below 3,600. We've got yet to see any confirmation to the upside, so you want to see that price closing back above that 4K. That would really start to turn the picture here and start to signal a potential double bottom being placed. But for now, got to keep an eye on this near-term support level, and then really the lows of those wicks. So near-term low today, 35.08, and then yesterday, 34.56. So this little zone here, if it cracks below that, you can see a pretty good sell-off down to around 3,300, and then possibly that 3K. So for now, just taking it easy, being patient, letting this play out. You don't want to over trade in this market. It's just very choppy, very volatile, not a lot of follow through to the upside or the downside, especially if you're using larger time frames. If you're doing shorter time frames, if you're looking at 5-minute, 15-minute candles and doing some quick scalps on the day trade side, certainly trades to be had there, but I'm just going to wait it out, being patient. Certainly building up the watch list from the BTC pairs on the altcoins, because many of those are signaling potential reversal and starting to gear up should BTC find a low here near term. So that's really what I'm paying attention to now, and my intention is to keep an eye on those names that really start to move first and signal a potential low. Very often what you tend to see is the altcoins will start to rally. You'll start to see more and more moves off of the lows before Bitcoin actually confirms. So barring any big reversal in Bitcoin just heading straight through all this resistance, if it just continues to meander here, starts to get a little bit of strength, maybe signaling that the selling is done, I expect you'll start to see a lot of those alts really start to move higher. So that's what I'm going to be paying attention to. But near term, the momentum is still very much downward. EMAs are pointing lower, favors the bears, but the sellers are starting to lose a little bit of momentum. If you look at the RSI, it has bounced a little bit, so it is ripe for a potential pullback. Another short entry. Going back to the daily chart here real quick, I am making note of this. I mean, look at how low the RSI has been for the last week and a half or so. It just has not been able to bounce has been in that sub 30 mark, and in fact sub 25 level for so long, and just goes to show you that a low RSI is not necessarily indicative of the sign of a bounce. In an uptrend, in a range bound market, it's very helpful. These oscillators help, but when you break out of a very flat range and start a new trend, it can remain at these very oversold levels for quite some time, as we have seen here. I mean, it's been at these levels basically since 5,600. Now we're at 3,600, and it just continues to remain low. On the positive, though, slight positive, nothing bullish yet, so don't get me wrong here, but on the positive, you're starting to see the MACD histograms tick up a little bit even as prices continue lower, signaling that there's potentially a loss of momentum to the downside here. Sellers are starting to become exhausted. Not a buy signal by itself, but certainly start making note of that. If this continues to move higher, it won't take a whole lot to start to see those big reversals, and we are maybe seeing those signs here near term. So just something to keep an eye on here. Ultimately, got to get back above these prior daily highs. 4,000 is really that near-term target I want to see it close above, and then of course the resistance here around that $4,200 mark, which interestingly enough is right where that 10 EMA is going to be. If prices continue to tick up, this will start to meet that price point. So going to be the key level to be watching on the upside here in the next day or two. If we take a quick look at the coin market cap, you can see just right across the board, for the most part, there was a new addition here, Bitcoin Cash SV, although they're calling it Bitcoin SV here. New addition, added $2 billion to that. Now moving higher here, had a big day, up I think 80% plus here over the last 24 hours. Very volatile action. I have not traded those. I've just stayed away from the Bitcoin Cash and the Bitcoin Cash SV debacle. Have not really traded those. Just kind of watching it, seeing how it plays out. But you're seeing a big move here earlier today. Besides that, mostly red across the board in the big cap names. You're seeing pretty sizable moves down too, 9%, 7%, 8%, 10%. There were some big pumps in some of the smaller cap names. You saw REC having a pretty good move. Seeing Digibyte show a little bit of rally here, and just a few names. NAM kind of trying to wake up here, but nothing substantial just yet. Not enough for me to start taking some trades, especially with the weakness all around on the BTC side. So I'm just going to remain patient, let this play out, and I'm going to wait for the market to start signaling that it's ready to at least bounce stronger than it's been bouncing right now. As we saw on the 4-hour charts, can't even stay above the 10 EMA for more than a couple of candles. Just shows the overall weakness, the lack of buyer conviction here so far. So just remain patient, continue to stay tuned in with the markets. I'm watching what's moving, what's not, what's holding up better, starting to build the watch list, and I'm going to be ready for whenever the market decides to finally turn. While there aren't many names outperforming Bitcoin, there's a few holding up relatively well here. One of these is Ripple, continues to hold up well overall. I'm watching this one from the daily chart perspective. It had that big run up even when Bitcoin was initially starting to roll over. Ripple was outperforming. You can see here over the last week, after that big reversal candle here at the top, right at resistance here, it started to pull back, but the pullback has been constructive. Not a huge sell-off. It's just kind of been pausing, letting the moving averages catch up. So definitely one I'm watching. You want to see this one hold above this breakout point. So about that 8,800 level is really where I want to see this one hold. We saw a couple of retests back into that zone. So this is really the zone to be keeping an eye on. But I'm going to be keeping an eye on this one. If it starts to break out of this little downtrend that it's in and start to move higher out of range, could potentially signal the end of the pause for this one. So Ripple's on the radar. Another one is Litecoin. Over the last couple of days, starting to outperform Bitcoin, not by a huge margin, up about 3 or 4% since this little breakout point here, but certainly found some support here at these lows, trying to turn the corner. I want to see this make a little bit of a pullback, set a higher low, and then get going again and really start confirming that it's trying to turn the trend. We saw something similar here few weeks back, and that just really fizzled out with the market topping out. See if Litecoin can get going again, but certainly on the radar, one to be paying attention to. Has outperformed Bitcoin by a slight margin over the last few days, and if Bitcoin can get going, it's going to be interesting to see if this one continues to outperform. REC had a massive pump today off the lows, up about 80+% at the peak before just finally seeing a massive sell-off. Big red candle on the 5-minute chart, just huge volume. You can see that here on the volume spike, and really just felt like a quick pump and dump, just went straight up out of nowhere, didn't really signal anything. You could see how flat it was and just took off, pulling right back. was a great move if you're able to catch it. I'm just, unless you catch them early, I don't like to chase these, especially near the highs, how volatile they get, because they can very quickly sell off, just like we've seen here. Wait for them to set up. I prefer to have something a little bit more constructive. It's all about managing risk, and chasing these after they're up 40-50% is just really hard to make a good risk reward entry on something like that. So very volatile. One of the big names that pumped earlier today, pulling back right now, but other than that, not a lot of big moves up to the upside right now. Things are just still under pressure as Bitcoin continues to pull back. And so until that changes, I'm just going to be patient and just wait it out. Like I said, there is a potential low trying to be established here. You can argue that this is forming a potential double bottom on this 4-hour chart. But again, you gotta wait for some confirmation. We have not seen the bulls confirm to the upside at all for this entire duration. And so the proof of burden is on the side of the bulls right now. They gotta form some stronger rallies, some stronger bounces, and see if we can get some resistance starting to be cleared to the upside. So that's the level to be watching here near term, guys. I will see you all tomorrow for another quick update. Appreciate you guys watching as always. Till next time, take care, everyone.